and tell him that he was your inspiration?
I have not seen him, but the day that comes, hopefully one day, I get to see him again and I can let him know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Professor Wong, in your testimony, you talk about the economic impact of Dreamers. One estimate, Dreamers contribute an estimated $45 billion to the U.S. economy and through their wages and pay $13 billion annually in taxes. You testified that with a pathway to citizenship, Dreamers would add $2.5 billion per year in additional state and local tax revenue. Explain that and what these economic consequences are.
Yeah, that 2.5 billion number is actually a conservative estimate. So it assumes an 8.5% increase in wages post legalization. So when we're thinking about projecting economic benefits, we are thinking about what life is like economically for an undocumented person versus somebody who has legal status and can fully participate in the economy. So that $2.5 billion additional revenue per year is a conservative estimate because that 8.5% is on the very low end of what we've seen DACA recipients produce. We actually see that DACA recipients have increased wages up to 164%. So that means that the projected increase in revenue could be significantly higher than existing economic projections.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Nobles, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm a strong supporter of more security at the border and hoping we can merge some of these issues and get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. I'd like to clarify one thing that is raised by Senator Cornyn about the effective date of those arrival in this country and eligibility. I introduced the original DREAM Act along with Senator Hatch. We have changed the date of eligibility in various versions of the bill over the years. It never stayed at the same starting dates. So it's subject to change if it is considered, and I hope it will be, by this committee and by the Senate and House of Representatives. But today we're also discussing DACA, and I want to make a point of the record. DACA applies only to immigrants who entered before their 16th birthdays and who lived in the country continuously since at least June 15th, 2007, more than a decade ago. No one entering now or any entered in the last decade would be eligible for DACA as we're talking about it. So if we extend and legalize DACA, that's the standard that's being used at this point. Senator Kennedy, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all the members of our panel for being here today. Ms. Nobles, I'm sorry. I don't have a daughter. I have a son. If what happened to your daughter happened to my son, I don't know if I could ever recover. I don't know why bad things happen to good people. If I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask. I'm just sorry.
Thank you.
I don't know anybody in the United States Senate who has worked harder to implement and control, well, let me amend that, to implement an immigration policy that looks like somebody designed it on purpose than Senator John Cornyn. The problem we've had in the last 3 years is that except until recently, when it became a political issue, President Biden just didn't care. And sometimes when a person acts like he doesn't care, it's not an act. And that's why we have way more, Professor Wong, than 60,000 minors, many of whom are being are being trafficked, sexually trafficked today in our country. And I suspect you know that. Professor Wong, you're a professor from California, is that right?
Yes.
And you were invited here as an expert today by our Democratic colleagues?
Yes.
Okay. You're on the board of directors of the California Immigrant Policy Center. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And I'm looking at your website. You and the center believe, I want to quote, if that's okay. According to you and the center, quote, the immigration enforcement system is built on white supremacy, economic exploitation, and criminalization, and must be dismantled, end quote. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of that statement.
Here it is, right from your website, and you're on the board of directors. Do you believe that our immigration system is built on white supremacy?
No, sir.
Well, you said it, Professor. Now, did you lie here, or are you lying to us today?
No, I did not write that statement. That I'm on the board of directors of an organization called the California Immigrant Policy Center that advocates for legislative changes in the state of California to improve the lives of immigrants. I'm not aware of that statement.
Well, you ought to go look at your website.
Are you talking about my personal website?
I'm talking about the California Immigrant Policy Center.
Yes, I'm not aware of that statement
whose
on the
board you
California
sit.
Immigrant
You
Policy Center's
say
website.
That the immigration enforcement system in America today is, quote, built on white supremacy.
That's not my statement.
Yes, it is.
That's not my statement.
You're on the board. It's built on economic exploitation, and it's built on criminalization, and it must be dismantled. You also say, you in the center, that you want to, quote, strategically push ICE out of our communities across California, end quote. Wow.
So an extensive body of research shows that interior immigration enforcement, to the extent that ICE partners with local police, has chilling effects across immigrant communities and their families.
Did you listen to Ms. Noble's testimony?
Yes, I did, with great concern.
Yeah. You think getting rid of ICE is going to help young women not be raped and murdered by MS-13 gang members? Is that your answer to
No, that's
bringing
not.
justice to Mrs. Noble's daughter? Is
No.
to call her a white supremacist and say that she believes in economically exploiting people?
No, that's not. You are attributing a statement to me that I did not make.
Yes, sir, you did. It's on your website.
Time has expired, Senator. I think it's inappropriate to call people liars in this hearing. I hope that we'll be very careful. The witnesses are under oath, and to say that they are lying is to accuse them of something close to a crime. And I think that term should be carefully used.
Well, can I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
When you get your, I'm going to recognize Senator Blackburn because I should have recognized her before you, and she has to go, and we have several others waiting. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I do have an honor flight of veterans from Tennessee that are waiting for us at the memorial. Thank you for the hearing today, and to each of you for being here. Thank you for your time and your testimony. And Ms. Nobles, we're so grateful that you would be here. I know this is painful, and I appreciate that you are here. Mr. Chairman, I do wish that Since H.R. 2, the border security bill from the House has been over here now right at a year, and we have not taken that bill up. I do wish that we would take that bill up so that we could stem the flow of illegal immigration coming into this country and then address some of these issues. I know that Senator Cornyn and Senator Graham talked a little bit about things that have been offered before. I know that President Trump, and recall that he had tried to get Speaker Pelosi at that time to work with him on a way to permanent residency for Daca enrollees, and that offer was rejected. But securing that border is important, and I was concerned about President Biden's announcement that he was going to offer Obamacare to everybody that is in the Daca program. Now, at this point, we have 85,000 illegal migrant children that HHS and the Office of Refugee Resettlement cannot find. They do not know where they are. They don't know if they are dead or alive. They don't know what has happened to these children. I've constantly asked Secretary Becerra about this, Secretary Mayorkas. They cannot find these children. They're not putting energy into that. But they think the right thing to do is go say, oh, let's give free health care, and then leave the border open, not secure the border, and ask the American taxpayer to pay for this when unemployment is at a 2-year high, foreign-born workers are coming into the workforce, taxpayers are struggling to make ends meet, but you want to talk about raising taxes and paying for a new program when you cannot manage what is in front of you. And fixing this issue at the southern border should be what we are talking about and what we commit to doing. Nearly 10 million in 3 years that have illegally crossed the border. Ms. Vaughn, let me come to you. When we talk about this new rule that would give health care, and we look at what is happening at the southern border, would the implementation of this new rule of free health care to all DACA enrollees, would that serve as a message that incentivizes illegal crossings into this country? How do you read that?
Well, I think my understanding of the rule is that it allows people with DACA who qualify based on incomes to access the subsidies of Obamacare, and extending benefits like this, taxpayer funded benefits to this, sends a signal that the United States is not serious about enforcing its immigration laws, that if people can just get here and stay long enough, they will eventually be offered these kinds of benefits.
Yeah, let me ask you about the parole program. You touched on that briefly. And I know that under President Obama and President Trump, that they each paroled about 5,600 individuals per year into the country. But in 2022, President Biden paroled 800,000 people into the country. And then in 23, he paroled 1.2 million people. I mean, look at the orders of magnitude of the actions that Biden has had, and has selected this niche program of parole status. So in my mind, this is abusing that parole program. I'd like for you to touch on that and how that affects the southern border.
Well, it makes a mockery of this discretionary authority that Congress gave the president, with the intent that it would be used for specific purposes for inadmissible aliens, people who would not otherwise be allowed to come in, for either a significant public benefit or an urgent humanitarian need. and with the understanding that the numbers would be very small, and it would not be used in a categorical way or casually as it has been. In some of the historical cases, it was used in situations where Congress was about to validate these grants of benefits, and that is certainly not the case with people coming here illegally. And we know from talking to the migrants themselves that they understand that if they can make it to the border, if they can make a down payment in their on their smuggling fee, that it's very likely that they will be allowed to stay here indefinitely without any fear of enforcement within the country, whether they show up for their immigration proceedings or not, and potentially have access to the same kind of benefits that are given to long-term people who've been here illegally.
I want to clarify something. The health benefits offered by the Biden administration is to Daca. In other words, to be eligible, you have to have lived continuously in the United States since June of 2007. 17 years of residence. This notion of people perched at the border jumping across because they just heard about the health care benefits bears no relation to the reality of the law that was enacted or the order that was issued by the president. Senator Coons.
Thank you very much, Chairman Durbin and Ranking Member Graham. And Chair Durbin, if I could, just before I proceed, you are a good and decent man. And one of the strongest impressions I've had of you is when I first came here 14 years ago and was presiding and got to hear you deliver a speech about Dreamers on the floor. It's one of the first things that happened after I got elected. And your passion, your engagement, your determination to find a way forward here has inspired me and has challenged all of us. And your bipartisan work with Senator Graham, Senator Hatch, and others is a monument to persistence in the pursuit of justice. Thank you. And I'd like to thank our witnesses today for appearing before us and for testifying. To Officer Soto Rodriguez, thank you for your service and your willingness to share your story today. And to Ms. Nobles, I'm a parent too, and I cannot imagine the depths of your suffering and agony, and I just wanted to convey my sympathies for your unspeakable loss. And I think it's important today when we talk about security and the border and law enforcement and Dreamers and Daca and the path forward that we have in our minds examples that are positive as well as a clear-eyed look at the record. I wanted to lift up today a Delawarean, Maria Cervantes Garcia. I first met Maria at Delaware State University. I've recently interacted with her because she's a chemist. I trained as a chemist. I wasn't a very good one. She trained as a chemist. She's a very good one. She today works for a company, Chemours, as an analytical chemist. I think, yes, there's a wonderful photo behind me of Maria at graduation. With a scholarship from the Dream.us, Maria was able to channel her natural aptitude for math and science at Delaware State University to a degree in chemistry. And she loves volunteering at Aspire Academy. She's been a coach and STEM ambassador for the Science Olympiad. Like every other dreamer, she is so much more than her immigration status. And so while we have this conversation about the DREAM Act that the chairman has introduced every Congress since 2001, it's important to also remind people what we're talking about is folks who are neighbors and friends who have real lives. They, like Maria, she is someone who likes going for a walk in Glasgow Park, has friends, is a member of our community, is contributing to our society in a very positive way. There's long been bipartisan recognition that we should act to address the status situation of people like Maria. We do need to address security at our border, which is why I supported the bipartisan border security agreement. But we can't forget about people whose status hangs in the balance and who are participating in the DACA program. I also briefly, if I might, Mr. Chairman, wanted to recognize the bipartisan introduction in the House of the Dignity Act by Representative Salazar and Escobar that recognizes the need to address both of these issues, physical security at the border and a path forward that provides for dignity. Let me ask two questions, if I might. Officer Soto Rodriguez, I'm interested in your perspectives as a DACA recipient and a member of law enforcement. What's your reaction to those who talk about the border and public safety as a reason not to provide a path to citizenship for dreamers such as yourself?
Do you mind rephrasing the question more shorter, like?
I'll
what
put it
exactly?
differently. I'd like to believe you testified that you're a law enforcement officer because of an interaction you had with a kind officer.
Correct.
Are you hopeful that your presence on the force will help inspire others to join law enforcement?
Correct.
And is it your view that the issues at the border of safety and security and the issues of whether or not people who were brought here as children decades ago are different issues?
Correct.
Thank you. That was the simple point I wanted to make. Mr. Wong, if I might, in Delaware and in states across the country, we're dealing with big labor shortages. Can you just speak briefly to how fortifying Daca and passing the DREAM Act can help address significant labor shortages in the United States?
Yes, the DREAM Act would bring hundreds of thousands of undocumented young people out of the shadows and into the labor force. Legal status will allow them to work more fully and more productively. Importantly, legal status will allow individuals to work in jobs that are commensurate with their education and training. And so when we think about undocumented young people, many who don't have DACA are stuck in jobs that are far below what their ceiling is. And so providing a path to citizenship and legal status would allow these undocumented young people to meet their full potential, thereby addressing labor needs across the workforce.
Thank you, Professor. One of the reasons I lifted up Maria, again, I want to express my gratitude to the Dream.us for making it possible for her to graduate from Delaware State University. She's an example of what is possible, but we are currently missing out the skills and the opportunities of many who are here in this country who could and should be on a pathway to citizenship and fully contributing to our society. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Coons. Senator Hawley and Tillis, I want you to know I made a mistake earlier and didn't recognize Senator Blackburn in proper order. So I recognize Senator Kennedy and Blackburn. Now I'm going to recognize one more Democrat, and then we'll come back over. Is that okay? Thank you very much. Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Professor Wong, you testified today that providing a pathway to citizenship for dreamers would significantly improve the American economy, right? A lot of us spend a lot of time in trying to do morally the right thing when it comes to dreamers and their families, but you're making an economic argument that doing so could potentially bring in billions of dollars in additional state and local tax revenue, create new jobs, and lead to a nearly $800 billion increase in our GDP. From those figures alone, the economic argument in favor of legalization, I think, is not just clear, but very compelling. However, as you may know, former President Trump has said that should he be elected to a second term, he would target millions of undocumented immigrants in a massive deportation campaign that, if successful, I can tell you would not just terrorize communities and lead to separation of families, ripping countless people from the only homes they've ever known, but I think you have the expertise to talk about what an economic impact such a massive deportation campaign would have on regional economies and our nation's economy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for the question. So Dreamers currently contribute an estimated $45 billion per year in gross domestic product. If we no longer had DACA and subjected Dreamers to that massive deportation force that you mentioned, then we would lose out on that economic benefit. But more to the point, DACA recipients and Dreamers more generally aren't just economic units. They are people who are embedded in our communities. And so in our most recent survey of DACA recipients, what we did was conduct a survey experiment to figure out what life without DACA would be like for DACA recipients. And so, as I mentioned earlier, approximately 58% would be less likely to pursue education without DACA. Approximately 63% would be less likely to pursue new educational opportunities. Importantly, 43% say they would be less likely to look for new jobs, and 42% would be less likely to report wage theft by their employers. And so not only would we lose the economic benefits that Dreamers currently bring to the economy, but we would put dreamers further into the shadows to the point where even if they were being abused by their employers, they wouldn't report it.
Thank you. And just to underscore the significance of your response, I want to remind us all of the distinction again, because our colleagues on the other side of the aisle keep muddling the issue. I'm not talking about people who may be on their way to the southern border to seek asylum or anything else. We're talking about long-term current residents of the United States and their work and their contributions to the success of communities in our country. Now, as we've heard today, it's been more than 2 decades since the DREAM Act was first introduced. It was in 2001 that our chairman, Chairman Durbin, and the late Senator Orrin Hatch introduced the DREAM Act the first time. It's been bipartisan since day one. The chair's been fighting for it ever since, and during all this time, dreamers have grown up. They've graduated high school, we've graduated from college, many from graduate school. They've started families, and those lucky enough to have the protections that come with DACA have established careers. They become doctors and nurses and teachers and police officers, like Officer Soto Rodriguez, who's here with us today. But in all that time, dreamers have also lived with the uncertainty and fear because of their status, and Congress's failure year after year to deliver for them. I'd like to ask Ms. Pacheco, who you said in your testimony that you're here representing not only your own journey, which is a powerful and inspiring one in and of itself, but you also represent the hopes and aspirations of millions like you who have lived through the ups and downs of this fight for many, many years. Can you please tell us what these past few decades have been like for you and others who've been waiting and waiting and waiting far too long for protections and certainty?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Well, it's been 4 administrations, Republicans and Democrats, in the last 20 years that we have seen this. And for me, the biggest devastation is seeing that today the average age of a DACA recipient is actually 29. They actually now have families. 1 in 10 of our scholars have a U.S. citizen child. They say that about 300,000 U.S. citizen children have a parent that has DACA. And for me, the thing that really hurts the most is seeing all the potential that the young people, many of them sitting in this room today, have and the desire to be able to contribute even more than they already are contributing to this country if they were to be allowed to be U.S. citizens.
Thank you. I have additional questions, but my time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. I've been in the Senate since 2015. I've been on Judiciary Committee since the beginning of that. I've sat through a hearing at least every Congress, and it's much of the same. We haven't done a damn thing. And a lot of that is because it is thorny, and people only want to listen to one side of the argument and not both sides of the argument. I have co-sponsored and supported efforts to have a path to citizenship for the DACA population. I also felt very strongly that we have to secure the border first. This administration, just a quick question, anybody just raise your hands if you agree. Do you believe that there are 9 million, roughly 9 million encounters at the border since President Biden's been in office, some number less than that are people who have ultimately made their way to this country? Do they deserve a path to citizenship? Let's call it 7 million who have crossed the border illegally since Biden came into office. Does anybody here think they deserve a path to citizenship? Okay, we have one in the audience. Do we believe that people that crossed the border illegally during the Trump administration deserve a path to citizenship? Okay. Do we believe that I think even the DACA legislation, I think the number is 2012. Do we believe that anybody who's crossed the border since 2012 deserves a path to citizenship? Well, I have to, there's a difference here, because I'm assuming because y'all didn't raise your hand that we're back to the traditional definition of DACA or dreamer population. But guess what? If we don't have an answer for the unmanaged border, there's no earthly way that we're going to get a path to citizenship for a population that I've supported. I've taken all the hits for supporting a path to citizenship. I support it for the reasons some of my colleagues across the aisle have. But I do believe, I think that the chair commented on, there is a huge pull factor. We're the United States of America. We're one of the greatest countries that's ever existed. Thanks for actually being willing to risk your life and risk the lives of your children for coming to this country. On the one hand, it's a great compliment. On the other hand, for somebody like me who's trying to get a path to citizenship and secure the border, stop it. Because every single person who crosses that border illegally puts me further away from getting a path to citizenship to the very people that those of you who are on the panel who support it want to have it. Stop it. Now we don't even have an administration. You know why the James Lankford bill imploded? A lot of good policy in it. Zero trust in the Biden administration for securing the border. Zero trust. And there's a good reason why. When you've got Democrat mayors saying we cannot handle the load that's coming on us because we're moving people off the border into New York and Chicago, when they have to experience the pain that Texas and some of the border states experience, guess what? They've been doing it for years. So we've created a problem that isn't going to get fixed until people who support a path to citizenship can finish the sentence by saying, and secure the border and stop the illegal crossings. And the people who say that we don't need foreign workers, that we don't need more people, I, for one, think we probably need about 500,000 more people a year to solve our demographic problem, to avoid what's happened in Japan and Western nations. But it's the people who say there's nothing to see here at the border, it's not a crisis, it's on you. Because until you recognize it is a problem, it is a crisis, you have to come here in an orderly fashion, you have to respect our laws. Don't let your first encounter with the United States of America be avoiding and ignoring our laws about legal immigration. Get frustrated. Advocate for more people coming across, but understand that's a problem, folks. Help me help you. If you want the dreamers to have certainty and have a path to citizenship, if you want the DACA population, as I do, to want certainty and have a path to citizenship, then stop trying to have it both ways. Because that is partisan, it's ideologically driven, and it will result in making these poor people that I am trying to get a path to citizenship further away from ever getting it. So stop talking past each other, stop only liking one side of the equation, stop pretending you like bipartisanship if in fact you won't support both sides of the equation. That is strong border policy, respect our laws, come here on an orderly basis, and then count me in for trying to get about 500,000 more into this country legally and doing something right for the DACA and Dreamer population. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening this hearing. Thank you to our panel. Just want to remind everybody in the room and everyone tuned in that we're talking about folks who were brought here as children and have been part of our society for 20 years in many cases. Children who were brought to the United States through no fault of their own and who are actively contributing and law-abiding and, as in many cases, law enforcement officers themselves. Neighbors and community members. And in Georgia, we host and are proud to be the home of more than 17,000 active DACA recipients, folks who were brought here as children through no fault of their own and have participated in this program established with bipartisan support. It's something that's surprised me about the way this hearing has gone so far, Mr. Chairman, is this has for so long been a common sense, bipartisan question of basic fairness. And I hope that we can return to that spirit as we approach this issue, because it is urgent, in my view, that we pass bipartisan legislation that establishes a path to citizenship for these Americans who were brought here as children and who otherwise follow the law. So I want to ask you, please, Ms. Soto Rodriguez. In Georgia, in recent months, many DACA recipients have seen substantially increased delays in the processing time for renewals. My office has received calls from DACA recipients as well as their employers. Work permits depend upon the renewal of DACA authorization. So from your perspective, what are the most profound impacts on the daily lives of DACA recipients when they're unable to timely renew their status?
I can tell you from my experience because I just went through it just this past renewal. I did my renewal with the time that they tell us to do it. I was about to lose my job because my work permit was about to expire within a day. When the expiration came in, my driver's license was already expired, so I had no driver's license, and I had to talk to my chief from the police department to let him know what was the issue. So it affected me. All these delays, it's affected me, and also affecting all the DACAs as well.
How old were you when you were brought to the United States?
9 years old.
9 years old. You're now a patrol officer.
Correct.
Which department?
Blue Island Police Department.
And so the Blue Island Police Department, at a time when law enforcement organizations across the country are having a tough time hiring and retaining officers and deputies, stood potentially to lose a member of the force if your DACA renewal was not processed on time.
I mean, they were following just the rules, but they were able to help me too, because they knew that I was doing the right thing.
Sure.
By renewing my permit. It was just not my fault that my permit wasn't coming on time.
Ms. Soto Rodriguez, what would be you've heard, there's been some theatrics at this hearing, and welcome to the United States Senate, but as you've heard all of the partisan speeches today and all the usual political talking points that people associate with Congress and see on TV, as someone who has lived the journey you have and who has achieved amazing things, and you're defending your community, you're enforcing the law with the Blue Island Police Department, what would be your message to senators up here who have been talking about this, the importance of establishing some stability, some permanency, about a path to citizenship for folks who were brought here as children, have been here for 20 years, have participated in the DACA program? What's your message to these politicians today?
Just like I mentioned in my story at the beginning, most of us come here because of our parents, and many of us are doing great things for the country, and especially because we don't see this country just as a country. Like, for me, this is my home. This is who I live, who I give my life for. So I wouldn't pick any other country. I know I'm Mexican. I know I wasn't born here, but this is my home. This is the only place I know since I was brought here.
Thank you, Ms. Soto Rodriguez. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all of the witnesses for being here. Ms. Pacheco, if I could just start with you. Your organization, the Dream.us, you provide support for undocumented young people for college and career success. Is that broadly right? Am I getting it right?
That's correct.
And among the things you do is you provide scholarships to these undocumented students. Have I got that correct?
That's right.
And so college scholarships, just to be clear.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Can you tell me, maybe you know the answer to this, maybe you don't, any of the students, do you know if any of the students to whom your organization has provided a college scholarship are currently part of the encampments on any of these college campuses, like the picture you see behind me? I'm sure we've all seen these videos.
No, Senator.
Nobody to whom you provide scholarships are part of the encampments?
I do not know.
Oh, you don't know. What about, do you know if any of the students to whom you provided scholarships have physically threatened Jewish students on campus?
I do not know.
Here's why I'm asking. NBC News just reported and I'm just going to quote now from the article. Quote, a Columbia, this is Columbia University, a Columbia undergraduate who provided only her initials because she is an undocumented immigrant and fears deportation, said last week she spent hours a day in the encampment. This would be the illegal encampment that's in violation of the law as well as campus policy. Spent hours a day in the encampment, I'm quoting still now, before university officials threatened to suspend those students. The article goes on, she joined, this student, joined a supplies platoon. That's a subgroup formed by pro-Palestinian campus organizers, end quote. Let me just review some of the things that these students, these in the encampments, that is, are saying. Of course, we often don't know who these students are. They're concealing their identities. This is, I'm going to read to you now, and I just warn folks, this is not pleasant stuff, but these are the facts, and we have to tell the truth. This is just from last night at George Washington University. That's here in this town. They projected, the students in the encampment there projected onto various buildings images of the United States flag being burned with the graphics, Gaza lights the spark that will set the empire ablaze. They projected the following: long live the student intifada, down with the settler state, that would be the state of Israel, I suppose. Glory to the martyrs of Palestine, it's a jihadist slogan. Stained with the blood of 44,000 Palestinians. That's last night at GW. Also at GW, they're now calling for beheading, the student encampment, beheading of individuals who support the state of Israel, including holding a people's tribunal where they're putting on trial, quote unquote, various members of their own board of trustees and calling for a guillotine. Here's Columbia University students on April the 20th, 2024. This is all public record. I'm reading this now. This is on, I guess it's X. Columbia University students yelling at Jewish students, and I quote, "Never forget October 7th. It will not happen, I'm sorry, it will happen, not one more time, not 5 more times, not 10, not 100, not 1,000, but 10,000 times. The 7th of October is going to be every day for you." The 7th of October, this is to Jewish students, is going to be every day for you, end quote. I guess my question is, Ms. Pacheco, and for anybody else on the panel too, shouldn't we be deporting these students? If we have undocumented students who are here unlawfully in the country who are violating the law, let's just be clear here now, this is a violation of the law, and if they're also deliberately inciting persecution of a person on account of their race, which surely calling for the murder of Jews does that, shouldn't we be deporting them? Does anybody think we shouldn't be? Shouldn't we be deporting these students who are here unlawfully? Ms. Pacheco?
Senator, we expect a lot from our scholars, and the scholars and the students that I know love this country, respect this country, and want to and enrich not only the campuses, but also this country.
That's fantastic, and I hope and bet that none of the people that you sponsor are part of this. And I certainly hope that's the case. But I just wondered, is there anybody on the panel who thinks that we should not deport students who are here unlawfully, who are engaging in this activity, who are calling for the death of Jewish students, who are violating the laws of the United States? I mean, shouldn't we be deporting these people? Does anybody want to defend it and say, no, we shouldn't? They should absolutely be here. I think it's indefensible. The record reflects there's total silence from the panel. You know, I also think we ought to cancel the student visas, and I've called for this. For those who are here from other countries with a visa, I think if they're part of this, we ought to be canceling their visas. And we ought to send a clear message. Actually, Ms. Pacheco, I think it was you in your opening statement put it really beautifully about how part of what we're talking here today represents the character of the country. I think that's very appropriate. And we need to send a message about this activity, not just about the trespassing and the destruction of buildings. That's bad, that's unlawful. But the threats of violence, and in some cases the outright acts of violence against Jewish students, we should send a moral message that if you do that and you are here unlawfully, you should be deported. If you are here on a student visa, you ought to have your visa canceled. This is the United States of America, and we are not going to stand for it. And I would just hope we could speak with one moral voice on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to return to the topic of the hearing and just tell a Rhode Island story, if I may, about a woman named Mariela Lucas, who came to the U.S. from Albania when she was 4 years old. 4 years old. I don't know if anybody has a lot of memories from before they were 4 years old, but pretty much all of Mariela's memories are from growing up in Rhode Island. Her parents opened a small business. Mariela earned high honors in high school. She attended Rhode Island Community College and the University of Rhode Island, where she studied to become a nurse. Not a police officer, but a nurse. Pretty good, right? She then earned her master's in business administration from Northeastern University. When she was in college, Mariela was student government president, and she served as the student representative on the Rhode Island Board of Education for 2 years. She also served as a board member on our Commission on Higher Education and Employability. She spent 5 years working as a registered nurse at Rhode Island Hospital in the neurology inpatient unit. At the onset of the COVID pandemic, she became a crisis relief nurse, working where she was most needed in critical areas all around the country. And as many of you will remember, in the early days of the COVID epidemic, it was not known how dangerous that pandemic would be. It was not known the extent of the risk that practitioners, police officers, EMTs, nurses, and doctors were putting themselves at by going about their jobs and their duties. They did, and she did. She now works as a quality performance analyst at Athena Health, and Rhode Island Community College is proud enough of her that they have asked her to serve on the Board of Trustees of the college, and she is now on the Rhode Island Community College Board. Those are the kind of people we're talking about here. And I just want to make sure we're focusing on that. This committee has been the place where some very significant bipartisan immigration reforms began. Chairman Durbin was instrumental, along with then Chairman Leahy and then Ranking Member Graham, in working on a very robust immigration reform that got 70+ votes on the Senate floor. I want to say 78, but it got a big bipartisan vote on the Senate floor. It was sent over to the Republican-controlled House, where nobody would give it a hearing, nobody would give it a vote, nobody would allow it in committee, nobody would allow it on the floor. It was just squelched, even though there was such a significant bipartisan vote for it in the Senate. So at the hands of the Republican Speaker, all that good Senate work went to waste. Recently, we've seen months of work take place on immigration reform. We stopped supporting our ally in Ukraine while we tried to hash through that. After all that work, after being presented with the most comprehensive immigration bill in 40 years, a bipartisan bill with the lead negotiator on the Republican side, the deeply conservative James Lankford, a bill that would have added resources to the border, added agents, added judges, added detention space, that would have upped our fentanyl detection capability dramatically, that would have tightened up standards in various programs, particularly the asylum program, that had the support of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal editorial page, who don't exactly love Democrat initiatives. After all of that, again, one Republican took it down. In this case, it wasn't the Speaker refusing to take it up. It was the soon-to-be nominee of the Republican Party, the leader of the Republican Party, who said, "Don't do this. Don't do this. I want the issue. I want a mess. I want to run on this. And obediently, our colleagues took it down, wouldn't vote for it, pulled it apart, and that was the end of that. We're still ready to go. And I hope that after those two unpleasant experiences, this committee is not so disappointed that we can't go forward. I do know that Chairman Durbin has many, many years of extremely sincere and diligent pursuit of this. Senator Graham has been involved in bipartisan immigration efforts for a very long time. It may take a moment for things to cool down and us to reboot, but this committee will be a good place for that, and I salute the chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And your summary of the current status of legislation could not be more accurate. Senator Booker.
Mr. Chairman, I want to pick up just where Senator Whitehouse left off. I came to the Senate, as you know, in 2013, right after a bipartisan group of senators courageously met in the middle and wrote an extraordinary bill that would have addressed many of the issues and concerns opportunistically being politicized right now. And that bill failed because House Republicans blocked it. And so from my time entering the Senate to what I watched with disbelief, I didn't think this place could shock me anymore. But to see someone who I consider such an honorable person being willing, in Senator Lankford, to join in good faith negotiations, to work for months and months, to have our caucus of Democrats move further than many of our caucus wanted us to move and meet in the middle on a bill that would provide billions of dollars to secure our border, would invest in significant technology that would help us to stop fentanyl from coming through, that would put billions of dollars in better processes to adjudicate people so that the nightmares that the Nobles family has endured would stop, that would create new laws and new abilities that were applauded by the very people who every day stand on our border, the officers' union, and to have that bipartisan bill objected to people, of course, on both sides of the political spectrum, but that had enough votes in this body to pass, and then to have President Trump demonize this bipartisan bill that his own Senate party members were saying we would not get a better deal under a Trump presidency. It astonished me. Immigration should not be a problem, it should be an opportunity. We should secure our southern border. Democrats have voted time and time again to put more resources into doing just that. But the political opportunism, the playing into the tribalism, the manufactured outrage is so hurting this nation, wounding us, not just in our own safety and security, but in our own economic opportunity. We are losing billions of dollars to our economy because we have such broken immigration laws. There are people that are graduating from our finest institutions with degrees in things that half of Congress can't spell, and we're kicking them out of our country. When I meet with agricultural leaders, they say time and time again that we should be ashamed of our laws. And when I hear testimony from people who contribute billions of dollars to our country's economy, who are our first responders, who teach our children, dreamers, and we put their lives every single day, they live with fear and anxiety. I can't imagine what it's like to have that kind of cortisol pumping in your brain every single day, afraid that one small thing that could happen could have you deported from the country, the only country you've ever known. And so God bless this panel. But as Ms. Pacheco said, this is not her first testimony. I mean, we should be embarrassed in this place that we've had for the entire career of my Senate, from a bipartisan bill to a bipartisan bill, all the time in the middle, we've gone through this exercise of rehashing the same thing, of having people come before Congress telling their painful, emotional, hurtful stories, and to what end? To have it destroyed by opportunism. And this isn't a both sides thing. The bill before I came in here was stopped by House Republicans, and the bill that just got done by Langford, who's had his career on the line. A right-wing conservative senator has had his career on the line because he was bold enough to say we could meet in the middle on this issue. So I'm at, my entire Senate career has been a source of deep frustration on an issue that we should seize and seize an opportunity, and not this continued crisis that politicians are taking advantage of every single day. Mr. Chairman, I have no questions for this incredible group of leaders, many of whom I know personally and have talked to for years. Thank you.